5 Azure automation mistakes to avoid with Mark Tinderholt. All righty. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty well. You know, when I said I was going to mute us, I actually muted me, and then, I couldn't announce the thing. So you see how well that's going so far. So, so hi, everyone. Welcome. It is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. Our guest tonight is Mr. Mark Tinderholt, here to talk to us about Azure automation mistakes to avoid. Before we get to that, I just want to run through a real quick kind of show note here. Of course, if you like the content, like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you watch us. You can join us online. We are on Twitter. We're on Blue Sky. We're on LinkedIn. We're mostly at vbrownbag on all of those places, and on YouTube, of course. I'm 6 Foot Dad. I'm the only host this evening. Everyone else is unavailable. But this is my first time hosting Mr. Mark, so I'm excited.
Me too.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark, for the folks that may not know you.
Well, I'm an engineer slash architect, whatever you want to say, at Microsoft. I have been in the technology industry for 20 plus years, mainly in software development. And, I've kind of cultivated that tertiary skill set of, automation, cloud automation, mainly as a necessity to get my software out into whatever cloud I was trying to provision it out to. And, along that journey, I discovered this thing called Terraform, and kind of changed my life a little bit. And I've been kind of using it ever since. This was, I started on Azure. I went to AWS, dabbled in Google Cloud, and then came back to Azure and, discovered Terraform, on my jaunt through the big bookstore in the cloud. But yeah, haven't looked back. So
yeah. What drew you to Azure over the other ones?
Well, I'm an OG, .NET developer.
Okay.
So I've been around the Microsoft ecosystem for quite a while. So that helps for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think I worked at a Microsoft Accenture joint venture, which that rhymes. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. No more rhyming. I mean it.
Anybody want a peanut? Yes.
There we go. Yeah. So I love it. Princess Bride. We're gonna be best of friends. Yeah.
Okay, good. Speaking of Princess Bride, total tangent. If you get a chance, there is a book that was written by Carrie Elwes about the making of the Princess Bride.
Ooh.
It is fantastic. Yeah, and Andre the Giant was both a giant, but also an amazing consumer of alcoholic beverages. So there's a lot of great stories in there.
I can only imagine. What's it called? What's the book called?
Oh, I'll have to look it up. But while I'm doing that, why don't you finish your thought?
In the show notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you were saying before I interrupted you?
Where was that? Yeah. A joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft. Sorry, like the whole Princess Bride thing. Called Avanade. And so I was doing systems integration work, building software using, .NET and the Microsoft ecosystem, and started, doing cloud, and it was Azure. This was before they went with PaaS. And then they had to back the truck up and did IaaS, and
right.
Yeah. So early days of Azure. So
what I have found that I liked about Azure over AWS was that it was more prescriptive and more kind of solution oriented and less kind of build what you'd like, But yeah, that's just one man's opinion.
No, that's an interesting perspective, and I definitely see where you're coming from. Definitely bouncing around the AWS console, I kind of feel like a kid on a playground. Like, where do I go?
Right. Right.
Whereas Azure, it's like a little bit more structured, a little bit more organized. But
Yes, it's more focused for sure. At least in the main services. Once you get off into like the AI ML stuff, it gets a little bit messy again. But yeah, the main kind of database, compute, file storage, like all that stuff is a lot more prescriptive. So the book that I just mentioned, the Princess Bride book, give you one guess what the title is.
The Making of the Princess Bride.
Actually, no.
Oh,
two guesses.
Oh, crap.
It's a phrase. It's not a single word.
Princess Groom.
No, it's called As You Wish.
Oh, As You Wish. Yeah.
Yeah. It's on Audible if you like audiobooks. It's fantastic.
As You Wish.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. So we wanted to talk about some of the top mistakes to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so I've encountered a lot of these. I made them myself many times. So I just thought, why not just dig up my dirty laundry and share it on, live on the internet. So
sure. I mean, if nothing else, kind of having learned things the harder way, it's really good to pass that along to folks to maybe help them get to where they need to be faster instead of going through all the bumps. So where would you like to start?
Well, I mean, I would start at the beginning, I guess.
Okay.
Do we have my slides?
Indeed, we do. Let me.
I'm not much of a slide connoisseur, but I did bring a few of them. When I do slides, bringing out the whole most interesting man in the world. When I do slides, I do very simple slides. But anyways, so first big mistake, that, and I see this everywhere. These aren't necessarily on Azure specific, but I definitely feel like I see these more in the Azure ecosystem for whatever reason. But boil the ocean, right? There is for whatever reason, there's this desire that we have to get everything into our automation template, everything into our environment exactly pristine, perfect before we actually deploy the thing, right? So we have to get every little feature, have to get every little thing, and only then, when it's perfect, when it's 100% perfect, then can we deploy it.
Right.
And it's analysis paralysis, and it gets you to this very unhealthy state where you can't go out and try things, and you might even be trying things in environments that you probably shouldn't be trying them in. Like if you don't have a built-in test mechanism where you can go try incrementally,
right.
You might think, oh yeah, we got to big bang this into production. I know from my heritage, working with ARM templates, just the difficulty with working with ARM templates, kind of precluded this kind of iterative mindset of like, okay, like I just need to add a resource group, and then I need to add a storage account, and then I need to add a VNet, and then I need to add this and this. It's okay if I don't have all that stuff like fully configured the first time, like I shoot this thing out in the cloud. Like, no, I got to go figure this all out before I try and deploy it. So, I think this was probably the most liberating aha moment that I had when I came to Terraform, where it's like like the verb apply is kind of, like already foregone conclusion that you're going to do it a few times. Mm-hmm. It's not like the verb deploy, where it's like, it's gotta like, that's it. It's conclusive. Like apply is like, yeah, I'm going to apply once. I'm going to apply twice, 3 times, 4 times, N times. So that whole mindset shift from moving towards that, away from that big bang to iterative applying was a huge just mind bender for me.
Gotcha. So when you talk about not boiling the ocean, how would you define kind of a good place to start? Like how would you limit that work in a way that makes the most sense?
Well, this is going to sound really, really weird, especially if you've worked with Azure before. But like, um, when I start a project, I start with a blank slate. I start with a resource group, right? All I need is a resource group, right?
Right.
And then that's the little like blank canvas that I need to start adding, whatever it is, right? So um, if I need to select my compute, often I need to select my storage, and then any ancillary services that I might need, and then I need to stitch them together. So just starting with a resource group, getting that pilot light, so to speak, out there, like this is my beachhead. This is where I'm going to start dropping some stuff in there. Just having a resource group is like the bare bones minimum from an Azure deployment. AWS, we don't really have, that logical container, right? I guess you can create resource groups, via tagging and stuff, but AWS, it just, or I'm sorry, on Azure, like it just, you have a little bit of a comfort zone where it's like, okay, here's my resource group. This is my blank canvas.
Right.
Let me go paint, whatever I want to paint on that thing.
Yeah. So what sort of things would you normally build? Is it like a multi-tiered complex application? Is it a more simpler one? And what I'm getting at there is, if you're designing a more complex thing, how would you kind of break up that work? Would it be layer by layer? Would it be vertical by vertical if that's the case? Like, how would you want to think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, sometimes, as that system gets more complex, you might have to kind of leapfrog from, just that one resource group into like, well, I mean, maybe I'm really thinking about like almost like a star schema where I have like a core set of, infrastructure that's shared and I need to attach things to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one pattern that I see like recurring many times in the systems that I build, where I have kind of this core, infrastructure that I set up that's reused across different components of my system. I mean, on Azure, we have the app service plan. It's a very common, compute service. App service plan has, or app service has an app service plan, which provides that shared compute that can be used across many apps, like app service apps,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a web app or a function app, right? So oftentimes, you might start off with kind of that app service plan, and you have some observability in there, log analytics workspace, app insights. And then it's like, okay, well, how many deployments do I want to like jam on this thing, right?
Right.
And so if it's one, then it's like, all right, well, we can just keep going in this little resource group that I got going. But if it's N, then it's like, well, maybe I need to kind of branch out and create a new like motion for these new things that I need to provision. With function apps, like I built many systems using Azure functions, and oftentimes each function has to be autonomously deployed. And so each function that you deploy, it's going to deploy to that shared app service plan. But each function may have its own dependencies. Like
Right.
today, you might have one app function that talks to OpenAI and Cosmos DB. You might have another function app that talks to just Cosmos DB, or, some external service somewhere, right? So that usually you start from some kind of nucleus infrastructure, and then you expand from there.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So does that only apply to development? And I don't want to get into like if I'm spoiling your surprises here. Does that just apply to development, or does that also apply to maybe testing as well? The not boiling the ocean.
That's interesting. So when you mentioned development, I thought you might be going like in the whole, like, well, what about different personas that have more platform engineering focus? Because that, like, I definitely view the lens I definitely view the world through the lens of like an application developer. But But yeah, like when from an application developer perspective, like you're gonna have, you know, different environments that are different stages of the life cycle, right? Like
Right.
this is my dev environment. We do integration testing here, right, as developers before we ship it to, you know, QA or something like that.
Right.
And I see that is a whole different dimension to the structure of the infrastructure. Again, I'm getting back into my poetry here, but structure of the infrastructure. But you know, like whether we have like you know, a star schema, you know, with some core and then like satellites that kind of are in orbit for different services and application components versus the dev test QA release stage kind of prod type environment. That usually in my mind is like a different dimension tied to how my organization releases software. Again, very much an application developer mindset, but
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
And I can understand how things would be different. If not as much on the architecture side, but at least like on the permission side as well. You know, where I work, staging or QA, everyone's an admin, right? Staging, not so much.
Right. Yeah,
Prod, very much not much, right? Like, so
definitely. Yeah.
yeah,
Like for prod, like the managed identity that your Azure DevOps build agent might be the only one that actually can make changes to that environment. You might not even have break glass access as an end user to do interactive to run Terraform locally, right? So
right,
that just, I think that just highlights the importance of being able to have these like lower lower life cycle environments like dev test, you know, where you can do these testings, where you can break stuff, you know, and test the delta differences, the delta deployments between version 1 and version N, so that when you actually want to roll it out to production, you have a high confidence that and a high predictability that it's going to be successful.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all righty.
The next mistake that I often see in the Azure space, especially in the Azure space, is this cloud shotgun. Now, this is a little bit like boiling the ocean, right? Because, you know, once we get everything to perfection, right? You know, we want to just provision it right away, right?
Right.
But the cloud shotgun is this idea of basically not thinking about day 2 ops. And you know, this is, I see this so much where it's like, well, we just want to provision our environment. We don't really even consider what it's going to be like to make changes to that environment long term, right? And so I see this very often where people do, you know, as a traditional developer, you know, I would see this like where people would do highly unmaintainable code, right? Where like you got Lambda functions that are just like, you know, doing all sorts of craziness. And it's like who in their right mind is ever going to be able to understand what that is doing?
Right.
You know, the same thing can be done with infrastructure as code, right? Like you can do all sorts of, you know, crazy, amazing things. I'm sure like you must feel like I've been there. Okay. I've been there. And I've been very impressed with myself because I'm like, wow, I can get the tool to do this really cool thing.
Yeah.
But then after I deploy it, then it's like, oh, I need to go change that. Oh, that's not great. This, like, what's going to happen when I do this? So the whole, this cloud shotgun is, you know, what I imagine this metaphor is like this guy, you know, this little, I don't know, is it a T-Rex or a raptor or something, like, you know, those mascots in the basketball games where they just like shoot T-shirts out in the audience, right?
Yeah.
There's no expectation that, you know, after the fan, you know, receives that T-shirt, that there's no quality assurance after that, right? It's like
Right.
you got your t-shirt, that's it. You're
Right.
done. You walk out of that stadium, there you will never see, that person that shot that t-shirt to you ever again, right?
Yeah.
And so there's literally no warranty at all, right? Like, think about it. It's kind of weird. Like, why would you think like there's some quality assurance behind that t-shirt that you got through the cloud shotgun or through that t-shirt gun, right?
Right.
No way. So this is this mindset that I see where people that are provisioning environments out into the cloud, they're just like, when they don't think about day two ops, they're like this t-shirt cannon guy who's just like, I don't care what happens tomorrow, we're getting this thing out into Azure, and that's the end of it, right?
Right.
And so it's all about day one ops. It's all about getting the thing provisioned, but it's not about, are we provisioning something that we can actually maintain in a stable and reliable way? Often neglected, right? Especially with organizations that are relatively new to the cloud, that are just adopting the cloud. It's like, oh, migration. How do we get out there? How do we get out there? Get those landing zones out there. But it's never, the thought doesn't often enter the brain. Like, okay, we got all the stuff out there. Now what?
Right. Yeah. And cloud sprawl is very real, just like how VM sprawl used to be. And, when we were all just working with virtual machines, it's even worse now.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the cloud shotgun. So this actually feels to me like kind of a almost parallel piece of advice that you have that would go along with the boil the ocean, right? Like, not only do you not try to do it all at once, you want to make sure that what it is that you're doing is not just a one and done, that you can actually maintain it. And even that, I think, would probably require a bit of an iterative approach. See, I still got it wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I can imagine that you would want to kind of take this in phases as you go, as you build this out. Can we maintain it? Is it meeting our needs, et cetera? So that's very good wisdom. And it sounds like you learned it all the hard way too.
Oh, definitely. and like literally you're totally very insightful, like thoughts there. There's a very subtle nuance difference between boil the ocean and cloud shotgun. Boil the ocean is like more of a critique of your mindset towards iteration, whereas cloud shotgun is a critique of your design considerations for day two ops, right? Like, you will if you are trying to avoid the cloud shotgun, you will consciously make design decisions that will yield you to better positions where you can have a maintainable environment, rather than just like poof, poof,
Right.
poof, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, my sound effects.
No, it's great. I felt like I was right there getting a very small t-shirt launched at me.
I could get the dinosaur suit on, and come back.
That'd be awesome. Maybe in a follow-up show.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. It's a Barney costume. Am I getting creepy now?
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. Next one, deploy by hand. So I was thinking about how I could phrase this, but I couldn't really think of anything better. But basically, this is about not having a repetitive, consistent mechanism,
Right.
which you can repeat deployments without human intervention, right? So this is like, not having a CI/CD pipeline, not having GitOps, right? You got Mark or Bob or Sally, getting on a console and, finger banging this thing into the cloud, right? And human error can happen, and people go on vacation, and, you need to have, a mechanism that is highly repeatable, consistent, that does not have a whole bunch of baling wire and duct tape,
Right.
to get stuff out into the cloud. And so this is, and the reality is this is hard, because to set up that automation for these consistent deployments. There's a lot of stuff that you got to do. You got to go talk to your identity providers like Entra, to grant machines access to stuff that otherwise humans would be. I already have access to it. If I deploy it by hand, I'm good. But
Right.
if I want to have my CI/CD pipeline do it, well, that's a machine. Like, I'm not going to put my password into this CI/CD pipeline, right? You gotta set up that stuff. You gotta set up the pipelines. You gotta set up the repos. You gotta set up, all of the contextualizers to point that pipeline at the right place. So yeah, people, oftentimes that goes by the wayside when you're focused on, like, gosh, man, I just need a dev environment so that my devs can be productive, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The deploying by hand, I think we all did a lot of that back in the day when we were setting up, precious little virtual machines that we would love and care for as if they were our very own children. But yeah, being able to automate something is one of the most important things about effective IT that I can think of, right? And I know there's a joke, like, if it's worth doing once, it's worth automating. It's not really a joke, but I've been in positions where, just by the nature of my job, required a lot of repetitive steps, and that's just prone to human error. The dog is barking, you got to get up and get a coffee, or you go to the restroom or something, right? And you don't remember where you are, what you were doing, and the only way to get like real manageable, maintainable outcomes is to automate it and to have a record of how you're automating it as well. So that's a really good point.
Yep. And it's even with all the automation, tools and capabilities that we have today, like, people still run the automation by hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's less surface area for human error to happen compared to, if we get in the Wayback Machine and where we're setting up fleets of servers manually, right?
Right.
Like, back when I first started my career, like, we would literally drop MSIs on, like, over the fence to the operations guys, and with a Word doc, it's like, follow this Word doc, install this, and in the Word doc somewhere, like, step 59 is like, run this MSI, right?
Right.
But like, even with all that stuff relatively automated, like, there's still a lot of surface area for human error to rear its ugly head, pointing at, like, in Terraform, pointing at the wrong back end key. Oops. Not interrogating your Terraform plan, to make sure that you're pointing at the right back end key, making sure you're operating on the right feature branch, right?
Right.
Before you run a deployment, like, to the right, back end key, setting the right Terraform workspace. Like, there's there's so many things that, even if you're highly sophisticated, right, you got to remember that stuff. And you might be daydreaming, thinking about something else, and skip one of them little steps, and bam, you're in you're in a world of hurt.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, sorry. Next one. We're getting near the end here. Security last. So again, these are mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not recommending anybody do this, right? But security last. So you often, like, hear the nomenclature security first, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't always happen. That's the ideal, right? The ideals don't always happen. So when people do security last, it's like, oh yeah, let's just get this thing set up, let's get it working, and then we'll go, like, apply the security stuff, right?
Right.
And there's so many, especially on Azure, there are so many wonderful ways to help, prepare yourself. Azure policy, on audit mode, right? It can tell you like everything that you need to go fix, right? So in your lower level dev test environments, apply that Azure policy in audit mode, and it will tell you like, all the stuff that you are doing bad, that you should not be doing, that's unacceptable. So you should go through that pain in those dev test environments before you actually have to go deploy it into production, right? So if you can reliably deploy in those lower life cycle environments, dev test, it's going to be a lot less stressful, a lot less pain when you go to production. This is kind of common sense, which I hope it is, but again, I have many scars to prove this, right? Trying to retrofit security, on some production system is no fun, right?
Right.
And you get blind spots, right? When you try and apply changes, and it becomes kind of an unpredictable mess, right? So just when the more, or how do I say this? The less stressful way is to do this in an environment that doesn't matter, that you can pop it in the head and recreate, and you're not losing production data. And that, that's your dev test environment. So go put yourself trial by fire through, in that environment rather than in prod. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, because when you talk about security, you're not just talking about like users and groups, like role-based access necessarily about a human. You're also talking about policies for accessing resources.
Network security often is the big
right.
like burner, right?
Yeah.
When you pop the wrong network rule, especially in production, it's like something's not working, and I have very limited visibility into why, right? And it becomes like a wild goose chase, lots of wild goose chases, right?
Yeah.
So not a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would think that one of the important things about security first, which is the good thing to do, not security last, is to kind of work based on the principle of least privilege, right? Like, do I need read and write to this, or just write, for example, right? Or or just read, right? Like, because once you do that in those early stages, like in the dev environment, as you were talking about, you won't have to figure out what to take away as it graduates up to prod, right?
Exactly.
And then go back and figure out, like, why did I design it this way in the first place? So,
yep. I think this one also parlays extremely well with don't boil the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Because the easiest way to test your security is to take baby steps, right? You ever seen What About Bob?
Yes, but it's been a very long time. Yeah. The baby steps.
Great movie. Baby steps, baby. You got to take baby steps. Especially with security first, take baby steps, to get yourself, to the like where you want to be. But the only place you can take baby steps is in that dev test environment, right? So you have to throw out the whole boil the ocean thing and take a security first approach, and then you can take baby steps and gradually get it to where you want it to be. So
yeah,
a lot of movie references tonight.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm sad Chris is missing.
Yes. I don't know if you saw, but he was in the chat very early on saying hi from the plane. Yeah,
cool.
And we also got our first spam comment in the chat, so I guess we're all grown up now.
Oh no, okay. What spam? Like, are they selling like meme coins or something?
No, it looks to be like a Twitch viewer spam. Yeah, nice. But I don't really have a way to like remove it. So if you see that, folks watching live, don't click on it. It's garbage.
Don't buy those coins.
Yes.
That's not Elon. Okay. all those, like, every time there's a Starship launch, there's always some like meme coin trying to have Elon with AI voice selling meme coins or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just an elaborate rug pull these days. Just there's an old saying about a fool and their money being soon parted. So yes,
Indeed,
that
indeed,
applies. That
it
applies.
does. It does.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this for a while. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have one more?
Oh yeah, I had one more. Yeah,
Oh. I thought
one,
we had already
two,
been to
three,
5.
four. We're on number 4. We got 5,
Oh
right?
gosh. Okay. All right. Sorry.
I will make it quick. We'll make it quick. Are we at wrap time?
Oh no, not at all.
Okay. Yeah, the one man band. So I think we all know where this is going. But another movie reference. Probably my favorite movie of all time. This is gonna sound weird, but Mary Poppins. Okay. Bert, right? The that what was it, Dick Van Dyke, I think. And he's like playing all these instruments in the park and stuff, and he's like honking a horn with his armpit and playing the whatever what is that, the harmonica, but I feel like oftentimes, because people perceive infrastructure as code and this deployment process as kind of a niche skill set, especially within the application development community, we end up pigeonholing somebody. I don't know, I don't know who you are, but like, tag, you're it, right?
Right.
You're the Terraform guy now, right? you're
Right.
you're the person that's going to be, you're the GitHub Actions guy, you're the Azure DevOps guy, and whoever you are, like, God rest your soul, right? Everybody's going to basically wait on you, and they're not going to touch it. They're going to wait for you to touch it, right? And this is so bad, right?
Right.
People go on vacation, people get, hit by buses, I hope nobody gets hit by a bus, but, we have to cross train, right? And it's not like this is a difficult skill. Infrastructure as code is very easy. It is not a hard thing to learn. The developers that are deploying to their environments, I mean, you're designing for the environment that you're deploying your code to. Like, you should know how that environment works, right?
Right.
So being able to understand how it's put together through code, and then that simple release motion, to get it there, right? People need to be cross-trained, right? So we should be growing secondary and tertiary skills. So whatever your primary skill is, you should be growing a secondary and tertiary skill. And I would argue that one of those, either secondary, tertiary skills, should be infrastructure as code. So that you don't have one of your poor teammates end up like this poor soul right here in front of us.
Yeah. I was actually kind of reminded when you were talking about you were talking about DR, right? I remember years ago we used to do, when I worked as a prod admin, we used to do DR offsites where we'd have to go to our like offsite data center and stand up the company, right? Well, what we didn't really think about was, why are we sending everyone on the same bus? Right? Like, should we at least take separate buses? Like, space out upper management or something, right? Like,
go in shifts.
Right. Yes, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah. I can understand being the one man band thing or the one person band, but being the one person in the organization that knows something thoroughly is a blessing and a curse, right? Mostly a curse. Yeah.
Yes. It feels like a blessing at first, like, oh man, job security. But then not for you, not just for you, but it ends up being a curse for the organization as well, because they start dumping on you. You inevitably become unhappy. And because you have beautiful job security, you're just going to go someplace else. And guess what? You create a huge vacuum,
right,
of disaster in your wake, right?
Yeah.
And chaos. So I think from everybody's standpoint, right? Like infrastructure as code should not be a niche skill set. This should be meat and potatoes, everybody, right? Because it's not that hard. It's really not that hard.
Yeah.
So it's sad how often it gets turned into this kind of, you get the, like, people treat you like you have a Midas touch, and it's like, no, like this is not complex stuff. I'm not a unique snowflake. We just need to grow that, develop that muscle in other people, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think, even if you're not going to be moving away from that company, it probably also limits your upward mobility, because why would they want to promote the person that knows how prod works, right? Like the only person, you don't want to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
A rising tide lifts all boats, and so does sharing knowledge within an organization, right? Hoarding the knowledge is not good. It doesn't work. So yeah, these are all really, really great tips. And I really like how they're all so closely related to each other, right? Like they're not in any order of importance. They're all equally important. And you really can't leave one out, because you'll end up leaving a lot of the other ones out as well, right? That's how closely connected they are. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are, I think I have a scar for every single one of these.
Probably.
And I've probably been this poor sap in that hat, the umbrella hat, way too many times. So
yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. So, you've written a few books, is that correct?
I've written one book.
It was a little bit of a change of pace, but yeah, I was.
Yeah, I just released my first book. It's called Mastering Terraform. Covers 3 clouds equally, mind you. This is not a bait and switch, like, oh, I cover 3 clouds, but 90% Azure, 10% the other 2. No, it's I give 3 chapters for AWS, 3 chapters for Azure, 3 chapters for Google Cloud. And there's many other chapters, but yeah, equal coverage to the big 3 clouds. And I cover 3 different cloud computing paradigms: virtual machines, Docker and Kubernetes, and serverless across all 3 clouds. So it's literally like apples to apples comparison. So if you're looking for kind of a multi-cloud Rosetta Stone, the book also doubles as that. I hear it makes a good door stopper as well. So, boat anchor, door stopper,
Is it a long book?
It's so my draft was 629 pages.
Wow.
But my publisher, they work their magic and face font faces and all that. I think it's 494 pages.
That's still a legit book.
So yeah.
Well, congratulations. Do you have plans to write another one anytime soon?
Not if my family has anything to say about it. It was a journey. I think I started it early in 2023, and I was way late. Okay, baseball season for my son, and all this like got in the way, and my publisher, bless their hearts, kept me on a schedule. But yeah, I think we released July 26th. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if we'll see if I can get permission for another one.
Gotcha.
I did just release a Udemy course called Terraform 101. So I'm kind of on the heels of that. And that's if you want to spend 10 hours with me learning Terraform on Azure, you can go check out my Udemy course. But,
awesome. Well, I will definitely include your Udemy course and your book as links in the show if anyone's interested.
Yeah,
where else can they find you, or where else would you like to be found?
Well, I'm very active in my hometown, sunny Columbus, Ohio. So if you're ever in the area of Central Ohio, you can come to the Azure meetup. It's a meetup that I organize in Columbus, Ohio, as well as the HashiCorp user group of Columbus, Ohio. I also occasionally go to the Columbus Code and Coffee, just to, shoot the shit. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but
it's okay. It's PG-13.
Okay. Just hang out with other programmers and the like and stuff like that. I have a YouTube channel called the Azure Terraformer, where I talk about, I don't know, 18th century French poetry,
That tracks. Yeah.
No, I talk a little bit about Azure and Terraform on there. Yeah. From time to time.
Very cool. I was over here looking those up so I could write them down. Well, thank you, Mark. This has been a great talk, man. I'm very glad to have finally met you. I've only seen your face as I've been managing the videos on the backside of the podcast. So it's nice to have met you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, and thank you very much for this. This has been great. It's always good to hear from folks who have been through the battle and come out the other side and learned how to maybe avoid a battle the next time. So that's always good learning.
Some battles are unavoidable, but
some are, yes.
At least if you're aware of the casualties,
right.
It's like,
yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any questions here from our chat or folks on social media. So any additional thoughts before we go?
Yeah, no, I'm just happy Azure terraforming.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mark. And thank you everyone for stopping by and hanging out with us. We appreciate it. And we'll be back next week. Thank you.
Sure. See you.